Hi everybody and welcome. My name is Diederik Klopper and I'm the host of the Voices in Payment podcast Season 2, in which we'll talk all about the A, B, C, D of payments. Throughout the season, I will be inviting payment experts to talk about artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud and data, and how these apply, overlap and drive winning business strategies in current day fintechs. In Season 2, I'm joined by directors, VPs and other senior payment experts who oversee these business operations, but even more often, I'm joined by C-level executives, partners and founders who have leveraged these technologies to generate immense growth. In today's episode, I have a very special guest with a track record in the banking and payments industry. She is skilled in interim management, business transformation, organizational change management, digitalization, instant payments, SEPA and much more. The very result-driven lady with a lengthy track record and the guest of today is Inge van Dijk, the Director, Payments and Market Infrastructure at the Dutch Central Bank. In today's episode, we are covering very important topics that are shaping the future of FinTech. Mainly the digital euro and how the central bank is keeping up with the rapid developments in payments. Without further ado, let's go into the conversation I had with Inge. Inge, a warm welcome to the show.
Thank you, Diederik.
Inge, I always start my podcast the same way. I never met anybody who woke up one morning and said, I'm going to be a payment expert. How did you stumble into payments?
How did I stumble into payments? Yes, quite some time ago, actually. I think it was in the early 90s. I discovered that my first job, that marketing and sales and more the commercial part of business was something for me, and I then applied for a position, and I ended up with Eurocard as a product manager. And somehow the passion for payments stuck to me, and I never left. So I've been in payments ever since.
Yeah, it's something we hear quite often. Somehow somebody stumbles into payments, falls in love, and never leaves again. It happened to me as well, so I'm guilty of that fact as well.
Yeah, we share that.
Hey, you're currently working as the Director of Payments and Market Infrastructure at the Nederlandse Bank. Can you share us a bit about your areas of responsibility and your focus areas?
Sure. I think I can imagine that for some people it sometimes is a bit puzzling as to how things are organized. But in principle, I think the Dutch Central Bank, or the Nederlandse Bank, as you so rightly put it, is made up of several important tasks. One is, of course, the central bank part, where we take care of monetary policy and financial stability, and also make sure that we perform payments and issue the banknotes that everybody uses. And the other part, of course, is the oversight, the overseer part. But that's not the part where I'm in. I'm in the central bank, so really the central bank core function, and my responsibilities include policy for payments and policy for market infrastructure. So everything that we use to make sure that payments are happening and safely and securely and are continuous up and running. I have an operation to that effect, so I deploy and operate with my department the Eurosystem part for the Netherlands. So we support banks within the Netherlands, but also outside the Netherlands in terms of access to the Eurosystem. We do the policy bit. I have a cyber team that is responsible for facilitating hacks and preventing and keeping up our walls to keep cybercrime out. And I also have an oversight department that looks after the most critical payment systems that we have in the Netherlands, and takes care that these are well functioned and follow the rules of the game, and are also well equipped to make sure that everything stays safe and is operating smoothly. Because as you can imagine, everything is geared to making sure that we don't have a downtime somewhere, because whenever that you do, we all experience that immediately.
Yeah, exactly.
But luckily enough, everything went smooth.
So far, so good.
So far, we're doing a good job, I think.
And you started in June last year. How was it for you coming into this position, and what were some of the main surprises that you found in the role distribution?
Yeah, it was certainly an interesting change, because I think I went from a scheme, MasterCard, to a clearinghouse and then to a bank. And the last bit I did for a FinTech. I also had my own company. and now I'm at the central bank side. So it's quite different. And I think what I found is it's a remarkable organization. You don't see much of it on the outside. Sometimes you have to go to them and then you have to prepare well. But that was always my feeling.
Or they come and visit you for
from
an
the
audit.
outside. And now on the inside, I find so many passionate people who are really, truly engaged in what they're doing. They're highly knowledgeable. And of course, also, these are very interesting times to be in a central bank with the Brexit already there, and then the pandemic and the crisis from that. So there's real added value, even more so. There is always added value, but even more so in these challenging times. And I find that people have been working around the clock like crazy to make sure that everything is up and running and everything is well catered for. So I'm also a bit in awe of all the colleagues, and very honored to be working here.
Yeah, it's of course an essential part of the financial system, and it operates a key role in that. Of course, you mentioned that there are two sides. On one, it's supervision of the financial institutions, and on the other, it's policy making. For which part, for instance, does the EMI license applications and PI license applications part fall? I was just curious.
They are all on the supervision part. So these are with our colleagues from the supervision department.
Yeah, but
yes.
I can imagine that the policy that you dictate does have some influence on those parts as well.
Yeah, I wish I could dictate, but that would be great. But absolutely, no, Diederik, you're right. So we align heavily on what they're. Of course, to a certain extent, there are Chinese rules that we take into account, but we do align where we can in terms of what's happening, what they see and feel in terms of the market. But we are also in contact with the market ourselves, in terms of understanding what is important for the Dutch market, for the Dutch sector. What do we need? How does this fit in the European whole? And how can we make sure that from both angles, both the European perspective as well as the Dutch perspective, we have the perfect input into whatever regulation comes new. And of course, that's a role that we play together.
Yeah, one of those roles is for me one that I think is extremely interesting. Is a European digital currency. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
The digital euro, yes, of course.
Yes.
It's one of the key topics, I would say, in terms of what's upcoming and next. Well, I think the main consideration there is that central banks are in principle the guardian of the euro. And so we provide currency, you could say basically in two forms. On the one hand, we issue banknotes, and on the other hand, we transfer electronic deposits, very high value, to banks and other financial institutions, and they then use that towards the retail market. And now with digitalization, that has spread to every corner, and I would say even the pandemic has had a very strong influence also on the cash use. So we see much more electronic, even more than we already had. So it's really growing steep. Certainly in the Netherlands, I think we are currently, before the pandemic, we were at, say, roughly 30% of cash transactions. And today we are, just before the lockdown, in any case, we were roughly around 20% of cash transactions. So we see that cash is becoming less and electronic is becoming more. So that's one of the things that in digitalization we see that many people are embracing that and have been already for a long time. Consider the retail payments where they are. That's already happening for years. But we deem it vital that the citizens of Europe in general have good access to a digital euro payment, and we see also many players coming into play also from outside Europe, and we think it's important that we ensure that alongside cash, so in addition to cash, there is a digital form of the banknote that becomes available to the general public, and we're not sure whether this needs to be introduced, but all signs today are indicating that it is relevant to introduce something like that because the market is changing. And currently we are in an exploration phase to see internally, to see with experiments exactly what type of function that the digital euro could play. And we expect that something will, in terms of policy, will come out from the Eurosystem, from the ECB, together with us, of course. We are heavily involved in the Netherlands in these experiments, is that we will come out with something mid this year. I was going to say mid next year, but it's already this year.
We're already 2021. We're already 2021, indeed. I think a distinction that you made there is indeed quite important, that it will be in addition to cash, of course. Cash is still needed for the full financial inclusion.
Yeah.
How do you see that in the years to come? Do you think cash will always be there, or do you think at one point in time we will get rid of cash?
It's always difficult to say. From an historic angle, I've been working when I was not with the central bank years ago, already for a long time on a policy to get rid of, so as you say, the accept gyro, and it's proven much more worthwhile, and it's still there. So I don't think there's no policy to get rid of cash to a certain extent, but we do see that cash is expensive. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, so we need to look into that, and my colleague Koen Vormer is looking into that with a research that they're currently undertaking together with a party, so that we see what is the cost of cash and how can we efficiently organize that, in view of the fact that we do believe that cash will still be relevant for absolutely the years to come. And I think also that the diminishing of cash, look to what Sweden has taught us, that cash also serves a function. And so we should be very careful of discarding cash too soon. I hear a lot of calls also these days in the pandemic of votes going up for merchants saying, okay, should we just please all accept only PIN? But please keep in mind there are a lot of people out there, also in the Netherlands, who have cash and who rely on cash, who don't have access to the banking system, and we would exclude them then, and that's absolutely the wrong way to go. So I think cash will be here to stay for some time, but we need to make sure that we have both instruments available, both a cash instrument as well as a digital form of cash, which is effectively what we're trying to establish with the digital euro.
With such a digital euro, that of course means working together with all the euro countries. I can imagine as well that many different countries have many different angles and wishes for such a digital currency. Or do you think that feel that it's quite aligned throughout Europe?
No, I think it's quite aligned around Europe. Yes, there are nuances, as you say, Diederik, but I would phrase them as nuances because, of course, our cash use has dropped more significantly than from other countries, but other countries have experienced the same drop in cash, and we all see that the market is changing. If you talk about the ABCD players, they are entering in every market. So in terms of making sure that as Europe, we control the euro and we control the digital euro and make sure that continuity for our citizens is safeguarded, I think that's something where we come together. And from that angle, I don't think that maybe some countries are front running and others are a bit laggard. I think that's always the case with every instrument that we adopt. So from a digital Europe perspective, we're very much united, and I don't think that there's going to be much discussion in terms of what we want to do with it. It's much more in terms of where do you start first? What is the key topic where we need to start? And of course, the European area may be quite different from the Chinese area or other players in the market. I think there is a difference, but I think in terms of where Europe is set today with SEPA and the instant payments and the retail payment strategy, we are quite like-minded.
Yeah, it's good to hear. You shortly touched upon the ABCD of payments. Of course, we shortly spoke before recording this podcast, but just for the audience, we're talking about artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud, and data. Of course, a lot of new entrants in those fields of expertise in the market. How do you keep up from a Dutch central bank perspective in order to dictate policies for companies that are operating in those fields?
Yeah, in terms of keeping up, of course, the policy department is heavily involved. So we have our own, we have much more, I would say, technical people internally, computer wizards working on allied artificial intelligence. We have a data science lab across the Dutch Central Bank to accommodate these, and we experiment ourselves. But we also benefit from exchanging views with other countries. So certainly also in the Bank of International Settlements, we are making sure that we work together on this and also share the burden of work a bit, because otherwise it's totally undoable. So many things are happening at the same time. And on the other hand, at blockchain, we've been looking at this for quite some time now. We know, I think, what it is, what it's capable of, and what is as yet less capable of. So interesting times, certainly on the trade area, to see where that's going. And so from that perspective, we are, on the one hand, in terms of keeping up, having our own experts, but we also listen carefully to the consultants in the market and make use of that. That's also the same thing. No difference from what everybody else is doing, I would say.
No, exactly. Yeah, but I also understand that for those who perhaps are not that well known with the technology behind those solutions, trust in the financial system is key. But for those who are not that familiar with those systems, seeing the financial sector move towards artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud, and data can be a bit scary. Do you see a role for the Dutch Central Bank to educate the general population about some of the benefits or some of the risks involved?
To a certain extent, yes. There is always an educational role for the central bank in terms of educating or informing the public, I would say, about certain aspects. And of course, that's a combined role with the market players, because they also have a role in terms of informing the customers. I think our role is much more on making sure that within the system, everything is secure and aligned, and that's where our supervision department comes in. But that's also where, in terms of lawmaking or in terms of outsourcing, we try to ensure that the right proceedings are in place to make sure that we can do checks and balances. For example, if you look at the digital finance package, there is a clear indication there, a request also very heavily from the Dutch side, to make sure that when you outsource to a third party, whether it is cloud computing or something else, if this is a vital infrastructure, and take into account that when we are working from home these days, many people are also using other services that we heretofore didn't consider very important and are now key and vital, that we make sure that these are unattackable, that our defenses are up, and that we can ensure that we can carry out red teaming tests to make sure, challenge ourselves whether they are open, so whether they are up and running. So from that perspective, we're trying to protect our system internally, and I think that's maybe even more so the focus than general public information. I think that's always a combination of the position of consumer organizations, the market players, also the central bank, but we each have our role to play in that aspect.
Yeah, and you shortly touched upon hacks. Indeed, you also mentioned that's part of the bucket of responsibilities for you. How do you go about protecting or making sure that the system is protected against those hacks?
Yeah, what we've done is a couple of years ago we rolled out TIBER, which is threat intelligence based ethical red teaming. Great name, look it up. But in principle, it boils down to the fact that we organize hacks on our own system. And from the Dutch Central Bank, we are facilitating this. We're very proud that meanwhile, the ECB has taken over this approach, and 11 countries in the Eurozone are now doing the same thing with central banks facilitating this. And what we're organizing is that the vital parts of our infrastructures, banks, but also pension funds and insurance companies, organize their own hacks. It's not that we organize it, but we facilitate the process, and we facilitate the knowledge sharing in terms of what comes out of these hacks, so that we, as an environment, as a community, are most well protected and best served, and keep our guards up as best as we can. So that's basically what we're doing. This is something that we will continue. And I think also anybody can imagine, we've seen so many ransomware attacks and so many other things happening, that this will be a key topic in the next years, and certainly something that we need to prepare for. Something big might happen. We need to make sure that we are well geared for that, with stress tests, with I don't know what the English word for this is. Draaiboeken. Do you know?
Standing operating procedures. I think it's more to plan of approach.
It's like a testing procedure in terms of seeing whether we're fit and eligible for and up to the task. So that's what we continuously do and try to maintain.
Yeah, and you mentioned performing hacks as well. Does it mean ethical hackers, or how do you structure that?
Yes, it's what we do effectively is that we set up a plan. When are you going to organize your own hacks? The institution itself selects the party, commercial party, to organize the hacks for them, and then we do that via a specific framework that allows us to share the information and evaluation points that come out of it. Of course, some of the evaluation points are for the institution itself, and others are for the benefit of the community for sharing. But the main thing is that we do that through a consistent framework with a standard reporting, so that we all talk the same language and that we understand what we're trying to establish. But indeed, it's with ethical red teaming. Yeah.
Then to jump a bit, because of course with the Dutch Central Bank your focus is on the Netherlands and Europe predominantly. On the other hand as well, there are a lot of technical developments, and as well a lot of payment experts are saying that the new age will be the age of Asia. Is it something that as well you see happening, and what are your views on that?
I think Asia is for sure something, a continent has already been on the move for quite a number of years already. And from my perspective, certainly many interesting things are happening out there. Maybe not limited to Asia, but I would say maybe also a little bit beyond that. Also in Australia, you see a lot of interesting things happening. But I think the main thing is that continents where heretofore they're making a leapfrog. Pretty much, I compare it usually to take our colleagues from France. They moved from the check or instantly to the card with the chip on it, and they did a leapfrog. And I think that's what we see happening in Asia for the last, I would say, 5 years or so. They are leapfrogging. They're opening up the countries. They have no infrastructure distribution network with bank offices that we have in Europe. So they're using the new technologies in terms of reaching out to the customers. And that also has, as we have recently seen, some governments worried, and they have tried to intervene.
Some specific persons in governments.
They've become a bit too vocal, a bit too dominant. And I think, so from that perspective, it's always good to have checks and balances. But I consider it from that perspective, and there's a lot of potential and a lot of money and also intelligence involved in there. So definitely something to watch out for. And this is certainly an area where we see it happening. Of course, in Europe here we have a lot of legacy who already had it very good, and then it's difficult to make
to make the leapfrog.
To make even more progress. And leapfrogging would be maybe going to the moon, but that's not what we're going to do. But certainly it becomes more difficult once you have the legacy in place. And I think that's been the topic for certainly the western part of Europe. But I should not forget also the eastern part, because I'm now giving them not much room. They have been growing immensely, certainly in Poland and Romania and Hungary. I see many.
We see a lot of new interesting initiatives indeed from Romania, Poland, Bulgaria. It's extremely
Turkey,
fun to see. Yeah.
I think from some perspective, because they are also had to make quite a big jump. And there's room to grow, and that's the best fostering ground that you can have for innovation. So here we are heavily regulated, makes much more difficult. So we can always look to Asia, but don't forget to look also to Eastern Europe, I would say.
Closer to home.
Closer to home.
What are some of the developments going on in Eastern Europe, in Asia, but as well Australia, perhaps Latin America as well, that you're most excited about? Perhaps personally, I've always been surprised with the dominance of QR codes in Asia. We had it here for a short while, didn't really catch on, that it was away for a while, and now it's coming back with players like PaymentGenes, for instance. But the sheer dominance there totally took me by surprise. Are there any developments there that you were shocked by?
Yeah, let's just say I'm on the same page with you, Diederik. There, I was not convinced that this was going to catch on, but that was a very personal opinion, I have to say, because from some perspective, I thought it was too. We were already further in terms of Internet of Things, or making sure that it's much more integrated payment experience. If you look at the commercial part of payments. But I think there we've seen that sometimes these things, and I think QR code has meanwhile proven its worth very much so also in the Dutch market, that whenever there is real ease of use for the customer, it will typically catch on. And if you keep your fees good in place, then this is something that's going to happen. So it's always the combination of finding the added value for the customer and the technology that enables it. And some things are still too difficult. So I was very much convinced that Internet of Things was going to happen sooner, but that seems to take a little bit more time.
Yep.
So that's certainly something that I'm going to keep an eye out in terms of technology, and of course the whole way the market is going to evolve in terms of existing players with banks, new players. The big techs have been here for a long time already. How they come into play in combination with fintechs, how this is going to change the payment landscape. It is going to change the payment landscape. We all know that. No, but nobody has the crystal ball in terms of where it's going to head. So one thing that we try to do from our perspective, make sure that the level playing field is safeguarded, that we all play by the same rules, and that nobody has the benefit of the first starter advantages or the legacy benefit or whatever benefit, but that we have a market that is equal and that everybody has the same chances. And then we'll have to see how it evolves.
But another interesting topic you mentioned is Internet of Things, and I think there's huge market potential for payments in that area. Just think about a fridge that is able to order groceries on your behalf, all the way through to Tesla's autonomous driving, and that if the car can drive for itself, then it can also perform taxi services for others. In that light as well, it would make sense to appoint an account number to, for instance, a taxi, to give it its own bank account so it can generate revenue and pay for expenses. But then that as well gives an interesting problem that perhaps the bank account is not owned by a person but by an item. Is it something that you're as well working with at the central bank, or is it something totally out of scope for the moment?
I think it's something that we are looking closely into. First, let's see how the market develops this, because
we're not there yet.
No, and there are many ways to roam in this respect in terms of Internet of Things. The key thing is that you lift on the existing infrastructure, and that you make it as seamless for the customer as possible. And I think indeed, if you let a thing pay that is somehow mandated by you, that you say, yes, indeed, this thing can pay for me, whether this is, I do a car wash, a simple car wash could be the trick. I think the fridge ordering food is a really interesting one, but I don't see that happening sometime soon. I think that the car wash is quite easier there, or paying for toll when you go to, when I drive to France, for example. These days we do that with a direct debit. That could be something, and then or you have a token on your window shield or something. These things I think can go quicker. But there are many instruments already out there that can make use, and whether this requires that we reconsider attaching bank accounts is another thing. We could do that also with tokenization. So let's just wait and see what the market comes up with, and whether we need to somehow to facilitate that any further. I try to stay away from going in too technical in terms of describing what you can and what you cannot do, as long as continuity, privacy, security, those things are safeguarded. That's what we're trying to do. And for the rest, we try to let the market develop on its own. They are quite good at that.
Yeah, we also shortly touched upon some regulators having some objections to some Asian developments in perhaps the super apps. Of course, you mentioned privacy, security of data is key at the moment, but there are a few companies that are gathering so much data of their consumers that they can perform nearly all services. How should a market respond to that?
What do you mean, how?
Both how should consumers respond to that? Should they welcome the usage of super apps such as Alipay, WeChat Pay, but for instance Amazon, Apple, etc.? I think Google are in a prime position to perform such services. But as well, how does the regulator deal with that? How do merchants deal with that? I think it offers so many different...
Maybe it's Diederik, maybe it's a much more a question for the market, I think, to a certain extent. I think that the public has already welcomed them, so it's a fact of life, I would say. And for sure, I think you also read the newspapers. From Europeans' perspective, we're keenly trying to eye that the privacy of consumers is safeguarded, the citizens in Europe, where these companies are not from Europe. And to make sure that we play by the European rules and that we can safeguard that. I think that's something that the public, the citizens and the consumers can expect from us. In terms from retail and how the market should respond to that, interesting times. But I think what we've also seen at some point in time, these big techs were small fintechs. So there will always be other companies that pop up and that find a nice niche or a nice area to set up their business and go about it. So I think it's already there, and we need to make sure that we organize it well. And of course, also the central bank has an important role to play in that aspect.
Yeah, indeed. So I think indeed those apps will have a definite future. People make use of those services to be better equipped in a new financial era. But as well, we touch upon the use of cash and financial inclusion. Do you think there are other things that the market can do to include more people in the financial system by offering more bank accounts to the unbanked, for instance? Do you think that is an issue that will resolve itself as the population further develops, or how do you see
I think where on the digitalization, maybe our focus is very much on privacy and security and making sure that the consumer protection is safeguarded. Here is maybe a much bigger role for central banks to play in terms of making sure that everybody is included in the system. And you might think that in the Netherlands we don't have that problem so much, but we do very heavily. So I think there are 1 million people in the Netherlands alone who are having difficulty with the digitalization. So we need to keep a very good eye out for them, and that's certainly going to be a key topic. So not just migrant workers coming in from other countries to the Netherlands, but certainly also just Dutch people who have difficulties to catch up, and they don't need to be old aged either. They usually are also quite younger. So from that perspective, inclusion is a key topic for me to be working on, and something also where I think we can do much more ourselves in terms of keeping an eye out for them, and that then translate back also to the use of cash, and how do we make sure that they are serviced well enough. And what can the banks or other parties in this respect do? What market players can jump into that? And what do the central banks need to do in this respect? I think that's one of the key things that we're going to see, that things are changing. We see them changing, and we need to make sure that people can have access. And maybe also the digital euro can play a part in that, with offering a basic bank account. That could be something in terms of making sure that people are included. But then again, we certainly don't want to. Let's just say we certainly want to do that in combination, in a cooperation also with the market players, because in terms of front-end systems, they are most well equipped in terms of delivering and accessing the public. So this is never something that we're going to do on our own. I think that's highly unlikely, so to speak. And maybe you'll quote me and get back to me on that in a few years' time to see how it developed and how we mature. But okay, that's what I think these days.
Well, I agree with you on that, and I'll use that as well in the quote. So don't worry about it. But as well, I think it's an interesting discussion to see whether we should want or desire to have everybody included in the financial system, or just be okay with the fact that percentage is still just using cash and living their life that way. So it's interesting to see what we should expect.
It's a key thing, and it's known throughout the public that if you can offer everybody a bank account and get them into a basic bank account type function, I think that's already been on the agenda from the European Committee for some time now. Everybody knows that this is a way of getting people into the white system and making sure that you get off the black market. There is a certain function for the black market, but in principle, this is better for the citizen. So that's certainly something that we're trying to do. And what type of instruments you then offer to that, a simple bank account or a simple savings account or cash to go with that, just a simple system. I think these are the things that we have to keep an eye out, especially if it becomes much more difficult also to be servicing everything. We've been depending on the banks for quite a number of years, and they've been doing a marvelous job in terms of servicing everybody. And the question remains very much whether that model that we had is still viable and works for everybody involved. So we always need to improve and change for the better for the future, making sure that everybody stays on board in this and can do their payments.
Yeah, and as well, of course, changing cards with prepaid cards, for instance, charging them with cash. That's also a way to include people in the financial institutions, even though that they still probably use cash. That they're not forced to have a permanent solution in that way, but can make use.
There's so many solutions out there. I remember 10 years ago, I was totally surprised when I went to Turkey, and that they had 2 different ways of paying for energy bills in Turkey. In Istanbul, by the way, the size of the Netherlands in terms of population. So think in terms of business case, how that works out. They were going with their energy bills to cash centers and then depositing the cash. Whereas in Antalya, they were offered a prepaid MasterCard or Visa card. And then you could upload the prepaid MasterCard and you could put it in your gas meter, and then the clock would start ticking. Totally different systems, but 2 times the size of the Netherlands. So you could invent your own system in a city like that. So it's always good to be talking to the colleagues from throughout Europe and in other countries, because they have interesting other solutions that sometimes are overlooked. And maybe that's also why we both thought that QR codes could not take on, and still
I use them more and more often every day. So
absolutely. And the key thing, of course, to make sure that it's a valid QR code, that you don't end up with a phony company, because as always, fraud and criminals will be keeping an eye out for the things that we invent. So that's a continuous battle.
Yes, indeed. Then looking forward, we started off talking about the digital euro, and you said mid-2021, so this year. We are looking forward to publishing the first things. But how do you see the trajectory for the digital euro going forward?
Oh, that's difficult to state at this point in time. I think we first need to look at what the experiments internally have brought us. Mm-hmm. And we are also looking at the design in terms of what are now the key features in terms of how we should do this. We're still in a stakeholder consultation. I think the deadline, by the way, if somebody's listening, you still have time. The deadline is today, I think, from the ECB to get input on the survey. So it's going to be difficult how this is going to develop. So we first need to bring our thoughts together, make sure that we align well with also the market and the stakeholders. And that brings us to an idea of terms of whether there's a need to introduce it now or later, or at what time. It's highly likely that we will continue on the journey, and there's much effort from the ECB and the whole Euro system in order to develop this. So I would say it's rather a question of when we are going to do this rather than if we are going to do this. And the pressure to make sure it's also very dependent on how the market reacts and what the actual need is in terms of stability, in terms of digitalization and inclusion and the cash development. So a number of things are coming together. So that will determine the rate. But you know also from instant payments, the ECB is very well equipped with the 4CB to develop quite quickly enough a new system. So from that perspective, I think in a few years' time, we certainly will see something like the digital euro coming along. But it's too soon to tell what. So
we have to wait and see.
Let's just first do the
take it one step at a time.
Yeah, everyone has an idea, but it's one step at a time. You have to have a very careful growth model in terms of benefiting maximum between the cooperation between market players and the central banks, not inventing the wheel ourselves, and really looking for what is it that we actually need. Because if you look at the report, we've had several scenarios, and some of them are much more maybe, I would say, at the forefront of what we need to solve, whereas some are less at the forefront. If we have a good instant payments, railways, and we have a nice QR code, and we put that on top of it, whenever then somebody is in a supermarket and the system falls out, you can use
that
that in terms of the fallback. And then I don't need cash and I don't need a digital euro as a fallback for that. So why would we need it? But that's the Dutch situation. And it's different from other countries. My perspective is much more on the inclusion part and to make sure that we have something alongside cash, but we have to make sure that it comes together from a European side. So let's see how this plays out, but it's going to be interesting, that's for sure.
I totally agree with you, and I think that's a great way to end this podcast because, yeah, indeed, there are many exciting things to come, but as well, we need to be a bit patient, give you all the time to develop it and further explore it. But I'm extremely excited to see how it will materialize. I want to thank you a lot for participating in this podcast. It's been an absolute joy, I must say. I hope it was fun for you as well.
Yeah, we had, I think, a conversation that went easy from one side to another.
Yes.
Even though we're both not native, it was. I think it was good. It was really good.
Yes, thank you very much. And looking forward to keeping in touch and seeing what the new developments will bring us.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Good to talk to you, Diederik. Bye-bye.
Thank you.